Wait for it. Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, first I'm going to say that there's a reason Nick hasn't been on all of these episodes. It's because he's at work when we record these. We purposely scheduled these because they're last minute and they're shorter around our normal recording schedule, and that normal recording schedule is set around his work schedule. So he likes to be here. He likes dragons. He thought this was a cool anthology, but his boss wants him to show up to work so he can pay the mortgage because the bank kind of likes it when you give them their money. So with that, today's episode is going to be a short interview about a short story. We're talking about my anthology put out by Bayonet Books called Deadly Flames, Dragons in Combat. It is the 11th book in our anthology series. And for today, we have Mr. Matthew C. Lucas on deck. Could you introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers at home?
Sure thing. My name is Matthew C. Matt Lucas. I go by Matt. Born and raised in Tampa, and been married, got 2 kids, got some books out and a bunch of short stories, and was just pleased and delighted and proud to be a part of Deadly Flames, Dragons in Combat with my short story, The Piper of Strath Dubh.
So this is one of the few episodes, because we put them out the way we do, where it actually airs almost immediately after it's been recorded. Most of you, dear listener, know it's about a month lag time, so we don't have to scramble at last minute when guests cancel. It happens. Life happens. So I'm asking this because it just happened for you, but did Tampa get the snow that other parts of the
No, we were watching it close, and it was, I mean, the line was creeping down across the panhandle and was getting further and further. My brother, who lives up in Tallahassee, sent me a whole bunch of pictures of snow covering like FSU and his yard and everything, but it didn't quite make it here. Not this time.
I've got a friend of mine that denotes that he's retired Air Force, but I've co-written with his wife. And they're just, author friends that, and someday, I'll hope to meet them in person, but they live in Florida, and his wife was posting, looking at this blizzard tundra or whatever. Let me check my map. Oh crap. It's Florida, because she lives in Florida and they got snow. And that just me.
I'll tell you, it did snow in Tampa once in 1978. I was a little guy, and I remember it. I still remember it to this day. I mean, it was just enough snow that if you took all the snow in your entire yard, you could build like a 1 foot tall snowman. But it was crazy because no one knew how to drive in snow or ice. So there were just people plowing into each other all over the place. But it did snow here once.
Nice. It's we get it in the Tidewater region. When we get snow, it's also, if you walk in your yard, you've left footprints and you can see the ground below. It's not thick.
Right.
Although there was some trippy pictures of an alligator head poking at the ice that was frozen over it, that was floating around. Now, I don't know that it's Florida, because, sometimes Florida, you have the sunshine laws, which meant they don't hide the criminal stuff, which means they're the most transparent when it comes to that, which is where the Florida man meme comes from. It's not if your crime stats are any better or worse. They're pretty on par with just about everywhere else.
We're more open about it. You're
just more open about it. So you get all the weird stories. And warm weather tends to attract the crazies. California has the same problem. I imagine Texas does too. I don't think it's political. It's just, crazies like the heat, I guess. I don't know.
It brings out the best in all of us. Yep.
I think so. But so because of that, you got to kind of sometimes question whether the pictures from Florida are real or someone's making a joke. But there's one floating around of the alligator's head butting up against the ice.
I gotta look for that. The pictures of the iguanas falling from the tree limbs, frozen and asleep in hibernation, those are all real.
Nice. My other favorite is the picture of the alligator. This one's real. It's in Florida, but it's got a butcher's knife stuck into its skull. And the joke is whoever pulls the knife from the gator is the true king of Florida.
I got to find that. That's good.
I might actually have to make that an anthology theme at some point in time and just go for ludicrous.
That is good.
The problem is going to be like somebody actually owns the rights to that image. And so you got to be careful, like if you're going to use something like that.
But it's got to be like a cheap meat cleaver or something.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the story behind how it got there. I've just seen the pictures. And it was one of those times someone was out fishing and saw him like, I better take a picture. No one will ever believe this.
Right, right.
So, all right. But I promise you a short interview, dear listener. We're going to have him back. We've got him booked in March, so you'll hear it in April for a full hour interview about his longer works. But since this is the Blasters and Blades podcast, we cannot let you escape without the religion question. So are you ready for this?
I'm ready. Hit me.
All right. Aragon, Reign of Fire, or Damsel?
Full disclosure, I've not read or seen all or any of them. But I'm going to go with Aragon, nevertheless, just because I have thumbed through that book and I admire the heck out of the fact that it was a kid that wrote it and had a lot of hustle to go sell a bunch of copies to get that out there. So I'll go with Aragon on that one.
You know, I didn't actually know that story about him because he's an adult now, obviously. So because he's putting more books out. I didn't know he was a kid when he wrote that.
Pretty much. I think like high school. And if I remember right, he originally self-published it and just, I mean, admire the grit. He just went out and hustled and sold a whole bunch of copies and got the attention of a big publisher.
Nice. There was a couple of years ago, a female that was writing, she was like 16 or 17, but she was writing like clean romance that was making it. And I'm like, I kind of hate her because I wish I knew what I wanted at that age, but I was just too busy like, ooh, pretty girl, sports.
Right.
I don't know that I thought like, hey, let's write a fun novel. You know what? I wonder if she's still writing. I don't even remember her name. She just had a YouTube channel at one point in time. Like all authors, when you start, you watch the how to be an author videos. And so you want to some interesting characters. But all right, since we are polytheistic here at the Blasters and Blades podcast, The Last Dragon Slayer, Dragonheart, or Dragons of Camelot?
Kind of the same answer as before, JR, but on this one, I did actually see one of these. I saw Dragonheart, and it's got Sean Connery in it, so it wins, hands down.
Any movie with Sean Connery is an automatic win.
Highlander is probably my favorite of all times, though.
Yeah, that's a good one. The problem is the canon in the later films doesn't all line up.
That as far as I'm concerned, those later films never happened. It's only the one with Christopher Lambert and Sean Connery. That's the only one.
All right. Did you like the TV series?
I watched a few. It was better than the movies that came after the first one. I'll give it that. It was okay.
I mean, it was 90s television, so.
Right. You got to put it in its context.
My only question with that kind of stuff when you're talking about immortal beings, because it comes up in like werewolves. Some lore has werewolves being immortal too, not all, but and then with vampires too. Like in the age where CCTV cameras are everywhere, like digital everything, how the heck do they like create identities now that you can't just move to a different town and nobody knows you and start over, right?
Yeah, I mean, technology has made it impossible to be an immortal. Is basically what you're saying,
or to hide it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, you're not gonna have a very good lifestyle.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, they generally the franchises have to come up with an answer for that, or they write the series before the internet, which is mysteries like to do that because you don't have to count in the fact that cell phones change everything, and
that wherever you go, you can have a location made of you. Yeah, I mean, it kind of ruins a whole bunch of mysteries.
So, all right, and because we like to do things in threes, we're told it's a sacred number or something. Knights of the Damned, Wyvern, or Dragon Fury?
So I'm going to go with Knights of the Damned. And again, haven't seen or really familiar with any of these. I'm going with that one because I looked it up earlier and apparently it got a little bit panned. So I'm going to give it a little bit of love here since we're on a podcast. Knights of the Damned.
Okay. So since you haven't seen any of these, what dragon lore, movies, books, whatever, have you watched that spoke to you?
Probably the big one, and I mean this is a deep cut, but the one that stuck with me the most would be the Dragonlance Chronicles. It's kind of a Dungeons and Dragons spin-off, but I remember those came out at a time, I was probably like middle school, early high school. I was at a point where I just was not reading at all, but those came along and, kind of good sized books, and I picked them up, and I mean, I just devoured them. They're really good. So I'd say the Dragonlance Chronicles. That's the number one dragon inspiration.
Given that we are comparable in age, did you get into the Pete's Dragon that was big when we were younger as well?
I remember that movie, and that was kind of a classic Disney live action with a cartoon, playing with the live players thing. And I just remember resenting that movie a little bit because the dragon was too cute. It bugged me.
Okay. That's fair.
Yeah.
All right, and so if you didn't catch it, we didn't pick up what we were putting down. This is a dragon-themed anthology. So let's hear what Deadly Flames, Dragons in Combat is all about. Okay, so obviously Mr. Movie Trailer Voice is not going to lose his job because of me, but we're going to try anyway. So prepare for a fierce battle as you step into a world where dragons clash with courage and ferocity. In these 17 gripping tales, heroes rise and fall, facing fire-breathing foes in epic confrontations. Each story unravels a unique conflict, from desperate towns defending their homes to warriors seeking vengeance. Meet the brave and the foolhardy, each with their own motives. Discover the price of power and the cost of survival. Will they conquer the flames, or will they be consumed? Join the fight. The dragons await, and the stakes are deadly. All right, so that was probably my best read, but it's like the 4th time I've done it for these short story anthologies. So we're going to call that a wrap. I'm definitely going to clip that and make a commercial. We're going to call it good. Hollywood will be knocking on my door. I know it in no time. All right, Matt. So what was your short story in this anthology called?
Okay, so my little contribution is called The Piper of Strath Dubh. It's set in 1331 in the Scottish Highlands, and it follows the main character is a man by the name of Bean Baird. And Bean is an older guy, probably like late 50s, early 60s when the story opens. And a lot of my stuff, I like to follow kind of middle class characters, not necessarily the big high kings or the most powerful sorcerers. I like to kind of follow the littler people. His job in this short story is to play quote unquote squire for a young noble lord who's not really all that noble and barely a lord, named Hugh Lamont, who is out trying to find a dragon in the Scottish Highlands.
So you basically like to write about the everyman as opposed to, the epic heroes.
That's where I tend to land on most of my characters. I mean, like, some of my stuff, yeah, well, the big epic fantasy, that kind of stuff, there'll be some kings and that sort of thing. But especially for short stories, I really do like the everyman point of view. But having them have interactions with maybe, like, I don't know, a dragon, for example, something that's way outside of their usual world. To me, that's good stuff.
Okay, that is absolutely valid. I like that kind of story too. I prefer that. Like, mostly I do the military stuff, but I still prefer the every soldier to the special squirrels because it's just more relatable, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's something to be said for aspirational fiction about writing the great, knight champion or whatever, but there's a lot of that out there. So, yeah. All right. So what can you tell me about the main character? I mean, could you give us a little bit of what you would consider his personality, that sort of thing?
So Bean Baird. He's a sort of a farmer who lives on this very, like, kind of, he's in service to a lord, but the lord is basically a glorified rich farmer. But Bean has one talent, and that kind of sets him apart and allows him to have a little bit of a better life than maybe the other farmers on the manor, and that's he's a bagpiper. He's a piper. So when his lord Hugh Lamont kind of comes into some money, he decides that he needs to have a personal piper, and he hires Bean. And Bean is one of those kind of guys that he's basically an honest person, but he's always looking for to make a good deal where he can. He's kind-hearted, but you wouldn't call him altruistic. Little bit of a drunk. He drinks a fair amount, which kind of par of the course for where he's living. And he's a fair to decent piper. So that's Bean Baird in a nutshell. And his job in this story is to basically tag along and squire for this young fella who is trying, for whatever reason, to find a dragon in the Highlands of Scotland, and to everyone's surprise, succeeds.
So that's an interesting take. Once upon a time in my youth, I too played the pipes. So is that something you chose because you're a piper, or it's just so quintessentially Celtic?
Both. Yeah, no, I've played the pipes for probably close to 20 years now. And I saw the call for the anthology, and it hit me right away. Like, I've never done a short story that's centered around, kind of the classic hero versus dragon thing. And then the idea of bringing a Piper into it just kind of fell into, and the rest of the story fell into place.
Okay. So what was the inspiration for this particular story? That was the inspiration for the character, but what about the larger story?
So this one was interesting, JR, I'll tell you, because usually for me, a scenario comes first, a character comes along with it, and I kind of just play with them. I'm more of a pantser, more of a discovery writer. On this one, it was more of an issue of, okay, here's this call. It's really cool. I had this idea for this character being bared, but it occurred to me right away. He can't be the guy that's actually going to be tackling the dragon. That doesn't make a lot of sense, or at least it didn't make a lot of sense for who the character I was imagining was. So I needed to have him kind of have to be a chaperone for a younger guy who was after a dragon. And then that led to the question of, well, why is this guy after a dragon? I didn't want to do sort of the standard, young man in search of treasure, or going to go slay a dragon just because it's their sort of trope, which is a lot of fun, but I didn't want to do that. So the immediate obvious answer, why does a young man do anything? Well, he's trying to impress a girl. And once that all came together, the story just sort of gradually started writing itself.
Yeah, the hunt for glory, often fueled by desire to impress the people you're interested in romantically, is as old as time itself.
Yep. And it's what makes us do a whole bunch of stupid things.
Even Adam ate the apple to impress a chick.
Right, you are.
So does this story fit into a larger universe, or is it just standalone completely?
Standalone completely. And in fact, those of you that read the story all the way through, you'll see that it is for sure and for certain standalone. I really enjoyed the heck out of writing it. It was one of those rare instances, JR. This only happens every now and then, but you're a writer, you'll appreciate this. Sometimes when you get really into the flow, when you really get into the story, you actually start feeling the feelings themselves. You maybe get a little misty-eyed in places, or you start, pumping your fist as you're working through a scene. This short story for me, this was one of those rare moments where it was just the good stuff was flowing, and I had a few of those moments. So I'm really proud of this one.
Okay, that's an acceptable answer. I've had a few of those short stories in my day that were like that. So obviously the themes of dragons is what the anthology was built about, but what other genre or larger themes do you think you applied to this short story?
So this one, music plays a really, really big role. Music as the universal language, but also uniquely bagpipe music. It actually gets it doesn't get technical there. Don't worry, readers, those of you that don't have an ear for music, or you don't have any knowledge about music, don't worry. You'll be able to read along on this fine. But it definitely, it taps into what is it about music that we all appreciate? Why do we appreciate that? And how that can be a multi-generational or even multi-species kind of thing that plays into the story throughout.
So when would you say this is set? Is this an alternate Earth, or is it set in actual, our timeline as we know it, just with dragons?
Actual time. This is true historical fantasy. So it's actual timeline 1331 in the Highlands of Scotland, just as you would imagine. Just all you're doing is adding dragons.
Now, did you throw them in kilts because that's iconically Scottish, even though the kilt didn't come around to the 16 or 1700s?
I did, because no one would believe it if you didn't put them in it.
I think people don't realize how relatively new, so to speak, kilts are in the grander scheme of things.
And tartans, for that matter. The whole idea of all these different colorful plaids, that was a more recent invention.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's so iconic that if you set something in Scotland, you almost got to have them wear a kilt.
That and whiskey. Yep.
I mean, well, whiskey's real.
Yeah.
If you're of Scottish descent, you gave the world whiskey, and the world owes you a favor.
Forever and for more. Yep.
All right. So did you you picked a theme of music. What is it you think, for you specifically, what is it about the theme of music and how it plays into the larger, fictional world that appeals to you? Why did you go there, aside from the fact that you're a musician yourself?
That would be the key thing. I mean, it's always been important to me, but look, music, even for folks that don't care for it all that much, and I don't think there's a lot of folks that don't care for any kind of music, but most people, there's some kind of music out there that they like, and it speaks to them at a deeper level. It hits a chord in their soul. It can, especially bagpipes. Well, I'll tell you, JR, I mean, you'll get this. Bagpipes is one of those things. You either love them or you really do not like them at all. There's not a lot of middle ground folks on that, but the people that like them, I mean, it really hits them deep. And different instruments, different genres of music hit people like that, different people in that same way. And so I was just trying to tap into that. Hey, here's a kind of music unique to a time and place that apparently can stir different people and different things very deeply and very profoundly. It's just it's one of those things. I think it's almost, you just sort of experience it and and you know how important it is. Kind of like love, like a great meal. Music is one of those things that we just, as human beings, ever since we've been doing it, we've been lauding it.
Absolutely. So I will say that those that don't like pipe music, most of the time, if you dig in, they don't really have a fair assessment because they've only heard it done badly. But that said, I do think you're right that piping music, much like jazz, there's no real middle ground. You either love it or you hate it.
Yep.
So I don't know if you wrote specifically what tune he was playing, because that's what you call them when you're playing the pipes, people. It's called a tune and not a song. But did you have anything in mind that he might have been piping for the scene, even if you didn't just say it outright in the story?
So yes, a little bit. It's actually, this is sacrilege to put in a Scottish story, but there's an Irish tune called the Pikeman's March.
It's a good one.
That I was kind of going through over in my head for some of them. He actually plays a whole bunch of different tunes throughout. I had a lot of fun though. I'll just give a little giveaway here. He gets tunes requested of him at one point, and all of the names of those tunes are made up. They're all invented, but they sound like they could be real. So that part was fun, was just making up names for fictional, mythical Scottish tunes. All the names of bagpipe tunes, though, I mean, you can kind of put them in groups. I mean, it's either a march, a retreat, something about somebody's farmland,
a dirge,
or drinking, or a dirge, or funeral.
So we'll see. Now you've just committed yourself, and I expect you to write the sheet music for these tunes now.
Yeah.
So obviously this is fantasy, second world kind of thing. And we promise you, dear listener, a short interview for a short story. So the last question we have for the road is the most important one. If you could, would you live in this second world version of Scotland in the 1200s where dragons are real?
Oh God, no. I mean, this is a hard place to live.
Penicillin and dental care. I mean, come on.
Yeah, you're dying by the time you're 12. I mean,
it's even worse than that. Like, this is the one thing time travel gets wrong all the time. At a certain point in time, even if they're speaking, quote, English, there's a certain point in time where you go too far back, and it's around the 1500s, where you can't understand them anyway. So you can't even communicate past a certain point.
Yeah, no. And I mean, if you shoot a thick Scottish brogue, I'm having a hard time understanding that in 2025. I guess if I could come back as Bean Baird, he seemed like a pretty decent guy. He had a good life for the time period. I would, but otherwise, oh no.
Okay, that's fair. This is the part, dear listener, where I remind you to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right books, so do your part. And with that, Mr. Matthew C. Lucas, that C is important when you look for him under the writing banners. Where can listeners and viewers find you? And as usual, all of the links will be in the show notes.
So I am on Facebook under Matthew C. Lucas, and I also keep a website and a blog. And actually, I'm fairly good about staying up to date on that. It's and what's called an occasional writing blog, where I post reviews, book reviews, movie reviews, thoughts on writing, thoughts on publishing, latest announcements about my books. And that's at www.matthewclucas.com, www.matthewclucas.com.
All right. And you can find us, dear listener, on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast. Again, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast, where we link to all the things, the bits, shoots, and rumbles, the YouTube, the TikToks, the Twitters. We have our Spotify website. We have our Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. We have our email, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, Blasters and Blades Podcast@gmail.com. For professional purposes only, people. Save the shenanigans from Adam Stabby Stab over there on the Instagram, Twitter, and the email. You can support the show by going to buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comments that it is for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink that coffee brand coffee till it pours out of their eyeballs, people. And if you want to try some of that caffeinated Java goodness, you can go to the link in the show notes. Use the code PODCASTGRUNT. You get 10% off. We get a little bit of a kickback. You shop local. It's a win-win, people. And with that, I would like to thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy and absentee co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades Podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. All right, Matt, thanks for coming on. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me, JR. I had a great time.
All right, we'll have you back soon for your full interview. And with that, we're going to